On today's show, I'll go through all the stats and analytics for every Blackhawks player through the opening 10 games, and I'll also preview a very interesting matchup against Jonathan Toews.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Make sure to go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram if you haven't done so already. And I have to let you all know as well that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Go and download the FanDuel app now, or you can check out FanDuel.com to get $300 worth of bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, happy game day, Blackhawks fans, as the Hawks kick off their 6-game road trip here tonight with a matchup against former Blackhawks captain, 3-time Stanley Cup champion, Conn Smythe winner, and franchise icon Jonathan Toews for the first time as he's now a member of the Winnipeg Jets, signing a 1-year contract with the team this summer after finally returning to the NHL following 2 years of absence. Should be a very good Central Division tilt between these two teams that has a little bit of extra juice along with it. I'll be previewing the matchup here on segment 3 of today's episode, so make sure to stick with me up until that point. But before I get to that, I wanted to open things up here today with Deep Dive 1.0 on the Blackhawks 25-26 season. And some of you may remember me doing this last year following every 10-game stretch throughout the 24-25 campaign. I think it's really fun and also insightful to do, to go in, dive into each player's analytics and stats and whatnot to kind of help us come to some better conclusions on how each of these guys are playing, in addition to what we've seen from the eye test as well. I always make sure to mention analytics, I firmly believe, are not the end-all be-all, but they do help tell a better part of the story in addition to what we see with our own eyes. So very excited to go through that here again on today's show, as the Hawks are now already through 10 games of the 25-26 season. But before I get into the stats and analytics, first for the Blackhawks 7 defensemen who they've consistently played through these opening 10 games, I do want to get into just a couple of quick takeaways as well. And this is something I'm going to be adding onto these deep dives that I'll be doing throughout the year. Want to just go through some brief takeaways that we've learned from each of these 10-game stretches. And what we've learned from the Blackhawks' first 10 games this year, first and foremost, in my opinion, is that Jeff Blashill is the first legit head coach the Hawks have had since Joel Quenneville. And I've just continued to be really impressed by Blashill's demeanor, how he's handled his team, how they've how he's got these young players playing really well and winning games and competitively being very consistent. I also think his mindset and his mentality, the work ethic that he's instilled in all of these guys, and even just how he handles himself during pressers and whatnot. Serious when he needs to be, not too serious all the time. But I really do believe he's a quality head coach. And after not really being thrilled by the hire here this summer, even though I did understand, Blashill spending 3 years with Tampa Bay after going through a rebuild with the Red Wings, familiar with the situation, and also got a real good look of how one of the best teams in the NHL over the last decade plus runs things and how they handle their business. I recognized all of that, and I understood why Kyle Davidson went that direction with Blashill, but it didn't necessarily wow me. But I've been really, really impressed by Jeff Blashill going back to the start of training camp and through these opening 10 games as well. I think he's a legit NHL head coach. Is he the long-term head coach for the Blackhawks in their rebuild? He's definitely trending in the right direction. That's something we're, going to find out more about and is going to get answered in a larger sample size. But he's definitely off to a good start, in my opinion, Blackhawks fans. Also, what we've learned from the Blackhawks through their opening 10 games is they're a heck of a lot more competitive than they've been in the last handful of seasons. And I give Jeff Blashill a lot of credit for that because, as I talked about leading into the season, because he's a new head coach, implementing some new systems here, and with all of the new faces and the young players who just don't have a ton of NHL experience, I expected the Blackhawks to get off to a little bit of a shaky start, and they kind of did in their opening 3 games, getting out to 0-2 and going to an 0-2-1 start through those first 3 contests. But the way that they've battled, the way that they've been right there on a nightly basis, I mean, they've only lost by 2 goals one single time this year, and that came against the Los Angeles Kings on was that Monday? My days are all messed up, Blackhawks. Sunday it was against the Los Angeles Kings. And that was with an empty netter. So every single game has come right down to the wire. And what also has really impressed me is the way this young team has learned already how to finish out some of these games. They let one slip away from them against the Boston Bruins in overtime earlier on in the year, didn't finish that game properly and got a lot of chances to go and pick up their first win of the season. But they've been a lot better in some of these tight, knitted, close contested games again than I expected them to be early on this season. Another takeaway that's really kind of caught me by surprise is how well the young Blackhawks decor is handling things. Now, there have been bumps in the road. We've seen in these last couple of games some bad turnovers that are leading to odd man rushes, and it's not perfect from this young group by any means. And Spencer Knight, with how well he's played in that, definitely has had their backs more times than not. But still, overall, and I don't know if you all feel the same way about this, but I still feel like the Blackhawks haven't surrendered as many odd man rushes or had just clear-cut breakdowns, particularly in the defensive zone, as frequently as I kind of expected them to have, with Sam Rinzel playing a top pairing role at 21, Artie Levshinov, who just turned 20 on Tuesday, being inside the top four, right? Even Alex Vlasic is still only 24 years old, and he's one of the quote-unquote older skatesmen of the roster now because the Blackhawks have this youth movement on the scene. But I just think altogether, the defense deserves a lot of credit for being a big part, in addition to Knight, backstopping them and being one of the best goalies in the NHL so far this year. I think the defense deserves a lot of credit for the Hawks being such a solid defensive group through these opening 10 contests. Other quick takeaway, don't want to talk about these guys too much because I'll get into each of them during my deep dive going through their stats and analytics, but it's really clear Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar are going to be huge pieces and huge helpers in turning around this franchise. They've already done that so far this season. I think has us all excited about what a potential 1-2 punch this is going to be for a long time in the forward group. And oh yeah, that contract that Frank Nazar said this summer, I told all of you right when he inked it, it has the potential to become one of the best contracts in the entire NHL. He's already proving that. And then last but certainly not least, the final takeaway that I wanted to get to before getting into these stats and analytics is that Kyle Davidson's plan, I don't really know how you can knock it at this point in time. And while, again, I don't think it's been a perfect tenure for him thus far, I do believe he could have done more to give Connor Bedard some help over these first 3 years. The free agent signings, I think Tyler Bertuzzi has been great for the Blackhawks forward group. And during my bold predictions episode going into this year, I said he was going to have a monster year. However, I think giving him a 4-year contract, especially with the amount of forwards that are going to be arriving onto the NHL scene over these next couple of years, I think that was a little bit of a mistake. The TJ Brody contract was definitely a mistake, but I don't know how you can knock Kyle Davidson for how well he's turned things around, even if it has taken longer than any of us wanted and has tested our patience at times. We see the promise with Frank Nazar, with Connor Bedard, obviously. Sam Rinzel has handled himself well, I think, in his, first full NHL season. Artie Levshinov. Wyatt Kaiser looks really sharp on the defensive side of things. Then there's Anton Frondel, Roman Kanserov, Oliver Moore, Nick Lardis, Merrick Vanacker, second in the OHL in goals, Nathan Bame, eighth in the WHL in points. There's going to be more and more additional help coming on these next couple of years, and that's why, in addition to the Hawks 5-3-2 start in their opening 10 games, it is a very exciting time to be a fan of this team, and that's something we haven't said in a long, long time. Now, with that being said, Blackhawks fans, let's go ahead and get into Deep Dive 1.0, the stats and analytics, starting for the 7 regular defensemen who have been in the lineup so far this season. Want to kick things off with Alex Vlasic, 24 years old, has played in 9 of the opening 10 games this season. He did miss the opener against the Florida Panthers, which I thought without him, the Blackhawks defense going up against the defending Stanley Cup champs, even if they were without Alexander Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk, I thought fared pretty well altogether. Before Vlasic on the season, no goals for him yet. He has added 3 assists for 3 points. Only 6 shots on goal for Alex Vlasic in 9 games played. And I understand he's not getting the power play chances that he saw last year, particularly after Seth Jones was traded and before Sam Rinzel jumped on the scene. He was getting a chance with the top power play unit. I understood that it was going to be hard for him to replicate a 30-point campaign, even if the Blackhawks offense is getting better and he's going to be playing a massive role on the top pairing. But one thing he definitely has to improve on is getting shots on net, especially as the team's leading ice time leader with 21 minutes and 46 seconds of time on ice per game to only have 6 shots in 9 games. That's something that Alex Vlasic has to do a little bit better of, but that's not dissimilar to what I'm going to say about most of these defensemen for the Blackhawks. 10 hits for Alex Vlasic in 9 games. I know that's not really a strong suit of his game and not something we can expect to see from him on a regular basis. But as I'll get into, there are just some other guys who have more hits than he does and are not 6'6" and 200 pounds. So would like to see Vlasic just bump that number up a little bit in addition to the shots on goal. 17 blocked shots for Vlasic this year. That's where he's been a great contributor, leads all Blackhawks defensemen in that category. And then getting into the analytics, 41.1 Corsi C4 percentage for Vlasic. I think a lot of that is due to the defensive starts that he gets on a regular basis and just playing a defensive-minded role. Been on the ice for 4 goals for to 5 goals against, though, at even strength, with that, which I think is pretty darn good for a guy who's averaging nearly 22 minutes per game on the back end for the Blackhawks. Only 5 goals allowed at even strength in 9 games played that he's been on the ice for, I think is really good stuff. 39.84 expected goals for percentage for Alex Vlasic, which is 5th out of the 7th defensemen that I'm going to go through. But again, this is why analytics aren't the end-all, be-all. Do I think Vlasic has been even necessarily as sturdy as he's been at times through his first 2 full NHL campaigns? No, but I don't think he's been absolutely dreadful like a 39.84 expected goals for percentage suggests. And then he's been on the ice for 57 scoring chances for to 70 scoring chances against, which again, I think for the type of role that he plays and considering, as I'll get into here in just a moment, all the rest of the Blackhawks defensemen are on the wrong end of that number as well, only giving up 13 more scoring chances than he's been on the ice for when he's not really someone who impacts those rushes, I think is pretty significant as well. Next up, we got Sammy Rinzel, as I mentioned a moment ago, in his first full NHL season with the Blackhawks after playing in 9 games, I believe it was, for them towards the end of the 24-25 season. And in the opening 10 games, Sam Rinzel has 1 goal, scored his first NHL tally in the home opener against the Montreal Canadiens, has also chipped in for 2 assists for 3 points, which I think is a little bit underwhelming considering the expectations that some of us had for Sammy Rinzel and just how darn comfortable he looked in his first NHL stint last year. I talked about how I think there are legit Calder Trophy aspirations for Rinzel going into this season. Not that he should be one of the favorites, but just because of the opportunity that he's getting and running the top power play unit, there was definitely the ceiling and the potential for that for Rinzel this season. Hasn't really come all together for him on the man advantage or in the offensive zone, but again, still so early into his career, still kind of learning on the fly right here, right now. And once he gets a little bit more comfortable, I think that's where he's really going to flourish in his game. 12 penalty minutes for Sam Rinzel. Forgot to mention 0 penalty minutes for Alex Vlasic so far this season. And again, for the defensive role that he plays, I think that is really significant. 15 shots on goal for Sam Rinzel. That does lead all Blackhawks defensemen. I still think there's room for him to grow in that department, but pretty good basis through his opening 10 games. And averaging 20 minutes and 10 seconds of time on ice, which is second among Blackhawks defensemen, thrown right into the fire by Jeff Blashill. But there's a reason for that, because you see the potential, you see the capabilities that Sam Rinzel has. And like I've said, it hasn't been perfect for him in the defensive zone, but I think for playing over 20 minutes a game, he's handled himself pretty darn well. 12 hits for Sam Rinzel also, and that's kind of what I'm mentioning. He is a big body, but I don't really ever expect that to be a significant part of his game, but for him to have more hits than Alex Vlasic, who is bigger, one of the only guys bigger than Sam Rinzel, I think that's, again, just somewhere where I'd like to see a little bit more out of Vlasic. And I'm not asking him to run over guys consistently, but I think he just has to use that body and be a little bit more of a physical presence. 15 block shots for Sam Rinzel as well, 32 combined out of that top pairing in their opening 19 games combined. I think that's pretty good stuff. 46.1 Corsi C4 percentage out of Sam Rinzel. He's been on the ice for 8 goals for to 5 goals against at even strength. So the same amount of goals against as Alex Vlasic, but 4 more goals for he's been on the ice for. And I think that just goes to show the offensive abilities and the contributions, even if it's not leading to points, that Sam Rinzel kind of brings to the table. And I think he also probably has gotten a few additional zone starts offensively, considering the Blackhawks regularly use 7 defensemen. 46.9 expected goals for percentage out of Sam Rinzel, which is third out of the 7 Blackhawks defensemen. And then he's been on the ice for 66 scoring chances for to 81 against. So a little more scoring chances allowed when Rinzel's been out there compared to Alex Vlasic. But again, the Blackhawks have created more scoring chances for when Rinzel's been on the ice, and I don't think that's surprising. Next up, we got Wyatt Kaiser, who I just talked to the other day following Blackhawks practice. For the first time, I got to meet him, shook his hand, and in the middle of that conversation, I had kind of the light bulb flash on in my head, like, wow, this guy has been on the NHL scene for 2 years, and he's still only 23 years old, a couple of years younger than I am. I was like, it's crazy how this kind of stuff happens more and more now, obviously, as someone my age continues to get older. But I thought just a really poised, really respectful young man who didn't take things too seriously. But on the ice, off of the ice, I've liked what I've seen from Wyatt Kaiser so far this year. I think his last 2 games have probably been his worst during his opening 10 contest, but altogether his skating abilities, how he's handled himself along with Artie Levshinov and not really having a consistent defensive partner because Artie and Crevier are kind of bouncing back and forth and technically that 7th defenseman role in terms of time on ice. I think Kaiser's handled it all really well for, again, a kid who's still only 23 years old. Would like to see him contribute a little bit more on the offensive side of things. I realize 10 games is not the biggest sample size, but 0 goals, 2 assists for just 2 points for Wyatt Kaiser. And with how he likes to get involved in the offensive zone and jumping up on the rush, I predicted that he was going to lead the Blackhawks defensemen in even strength goals this year. And for him to have 0 in the opening 10 contests, especially when I think he had 3 goals in the final 18 games last year, that's a little bit disappointing to me, but obviously still early on in the year. 4 penalty minutes for Kaiser thus far, 9 shots on goal. And in a different, same conversation that I had with Alex Vlasic, but in a different way, because Kaiser is known as more of an offensive-minded defenseman. For him to have only 9 shots on goal in 10 games, he's got to boost that numbers up. And that's a big takeaway that the Blackhawks defensemen, I think, should come away with in these opening 10 contests. Get the puck on net a little bit more frequently, because as Louis Crevier proved on Tuesday, good things happen when you do that. 19 minutes and 49 seconds of time on ice for Wyatt Kaiser. That's third among all Blackhawks defensemen. So again, for the opportunity that he's getting, and I think he's deserved of being the 3rd highest ice time leader of the Blackhawks defensemen, he's got to be firing the puck on net a little bit more frequently. 11 hits for Wyatt Kaiser as well in these 10 games. Another guy who has more hits than Alex Vlasic, to kind of go and prove my point from earlier. 6 block shots for Kaiser, 46.56 Corsi for percentage, a little bit better than Sam Rinzel. He's been on the ice for 10 goals for to 7 goals against at even strength, which is a pretty solid number. 41.22 expected goals for percentage. To me, that was a little bit surprising considering the Corsi 4 and how many goals he's been out there for on the ice. But again, analytics can be flawed at times, and that's why they're not the end all be all. And then Kaiser's been on the ice for 63 scoring chances for, right around the same amount as Sam Rinzel, while he's been out there for 77 scoring chances against, a little lower than Rinzel. Next up, we got Artie Levshinov, who just turned 20 years old. Happy the Blackhawks got him a win for his birthday on Tuesday. He's played in 9 of the opening 10 games. Of course, was scratched for the home opener against the Canadiens, which I did think was deserved, but considering, the fans that were in attendance, the red carpet event, not letting Levshinov go through that, I think was a little bit of a harsh punishment. But ever since then, I will say, maybe it was the right button pressed by Blashill, because I think Levshinov has not only been better in this last stretch of games, but he's been sturdier. We haven't seen the roller coaster rides that we got late last year and in the first handful of games this season that we typically see from Artie Levshinov, where he's kind of all over the place. He's a little bit of a rover defenseman. There's not a whole lot of structure there. I think he's done a lot better of a job in that department. And that was something I talked about early on in the season. If he wants to have success right here, right now, I don't know, if you want to drift him away from that mentality long-term, because when he does get more experience and more confidence and a little bit older, that style on a good Blackhawks team could be really effective. But I think for him to survive in the NHL right here, right now, he had to kind of sturdy up his game. And I think he's definitely done that over the last 5 to 6 contests. 3 assists, no goals for Artie Levshinov in his first 9 games this year. Does have 10 penalty minutes, which something I think he actually has cleaned up after, I think, taking 3 or 4 penalties in the opening 4 games. 8 shots on goal only, though, for Levshinov. As someone who's getting an opportunity to quarterback the second power play unit, would definitely like to see that number go up a little bit more. 14 minutes and 42 seconds of time on ice is what Levshinov is averaging. Only Louis Crevier among all Blackhawks defensemen has a lower time on ice. 12 hits, though, from Artie Levshinov. Like to see him be a little bit physical and use that bigger frame that he has in the defensive zone. Chipped in for 3 block shots as well. He actually, analytically, has been one of the better defensemen in the NHL so far this year. 51.41 Corsi for percentage, while also being on the ice for 8 goals for to only 4 against at even strength. So some pretty impressive stuff there from Artie, and I think matches up with what I was just saying. He's been a lot sturdier in these last handful of games, and also has a 50.95 expected goals for percentage, which is second among all Blackhawks defensemen. He's the only blue liner of these 7 who's been on the ice for more scoring chances for than they have against. 39 scoring chances for to 36 against. The Blackhawks lead when Artem Levshinov has been on the ice. Good stuff from Artie here. Next up, we got Connor Murphy, who's played all 10 games for the Blackhawks on the blue line. No goals, no assists, no points. He provides literally nothing on the offensive side of things. But honestly, that's not really what we need Connor Murphy for right here, right now, in the final year of his contract. 6 penalty minutes for Murph. I thought he's done a good job of staying out of the box for the most part for a defensive guy. 11 shots on goal. He has more shots on goal than Artie Levshinov, than Wyatt Kaiser, than Alex Vlasic. That should be a reminder to all the other Blackhawks defensemen to simplify your game, get the pucks on net a little bit more frequently. And this is coming from Connor Murphy, who's only averaging 16 minutes and 8 seconds of time on ice this year, which is 4th among all Blackhawks defensemen. So it's not like he's playing a huge role or anything like he has the last couple of years. He's down on the third pairing and still has more shots on goal than all of those guys. 7 hits for Murphy, a little bit disappointing to me, but also I've thought about, as he's getting up there in age, and just considering how banged up he's been throughout his career, constantly in and out of the lineup, if he has to sacrifice the physicality to be in the lineup consistently, that's something that I'm okay with. Has chipped in for 13 block shots, though, to lead all Blackhawks to be 3rd among all Blackhawks defensemen in that category. 44.23 Corsi for percentage. And this, I think, goes to show you why Corsi for is a little bit of a flawed statistic. Shot attempts for, shot attempts against. I understand it, but I don't think it should be weighed as like the most critical statistic, because there's no way Connor Murphy has been, more impactful than Alex Vlasic in games this year, but he's obviously the one with the better Corsi for percentage, even though he's only been on the ice for 1 goal for to 4 goals against at even strength. Defensively, though, for Murphy to only be on the ice for 4 goals against in 10 games is really solid. 39.28 expected goals for percentage, which is the 2nd worst, which I think goes to show you that Murphy really doesn't get himself involved in the offensive zone or on the offensive side of things. And then he's been on the ice for 32 scoring chances for, lowest among all Blackhawks defensemen, to 54 scoring chances against. Next, we got Matt Grzelcyk, who I got to throw a little bit of a bone to, because I really think Grzelcyk over the last 6 or 7 games has been pretty darn good for the Blackhawks. After all the flack I gave him going into the start of this year and the decision to sign him off of that PTO, he's proved it was the right call by general manager Kyle Davidson, because in 10 games played, while Grzelcyk doesn't have a goal yet, he only has 2 assists. He is +7, which plus minus, not the end all be all of statistics, but that's a team high, leads all Blackhawks. And for it to be a 3rd pairing defenseman, I think that's pretty darn noteworthy. Grzelcyk has also done a good job of staying on the box with only 2 penalty minutes. And as someone who isn't known for his defensive zone strengths, he really hasn't put himself in harm's way or been in a position to take bad penalties or anything. So I think that's been really impressive. Then he also has 14 shots on goal, which that's a number that's pretty darn impressive, again, considering the minor role that he plays on the 3rd pairing, averaging just 15 minutes and 4 seconds of time on ice. He's one of the leading shots on goal getters for Blackhawks defensemen, actually is number 2 behind Sammy Rinzel. 9 block shots also from Grzelcyk too, I think goes to show that he's willing to sacrifice the body, and he's just doing all of the right things in the defensive zone right now, along with Connor Murphy, getting it out pretty cleanly. And I've been, again, really surprised with how well Grzelcyk has fared in that area. He's got a 52.26 Corsi for percentage, which leads all Blackhawks defensemen, and has been on the ice for 11 goals for to only 4 against. My, oh my, Matt Grzelcyk, what a start to his Blackhawks tenure. 57.28 expected goals for percentage as well, which is first among all 7 Blackhawks defensemen. He's been on the ice for 56 scoring chances for to 64 against. Really good stuff out of Matt Grzelcyk. And then last but certainly not least, Louis Crevier, who's played in 9 of the opening 10 games, and believe it or not, Blackhawks fans, he's the leading goal scorer of all Blackhawks defensemen with 2 goals and with 2 assists, giving him 4 points. He's also the leading point scorer of all the Blackhawks defensemen. And if you would have told me that, even though it's only 10 games, going into the start of the year through the opening 10 contests, that with Sam Renzel, with Wyatt Kaiser, with Artie Levshunov, shoot, even with Matt Grzelcyk, who's known as a puck-moving, offensive-minded defenseman, that it would be Louis Crevier, a 7th round pick back in 2020, who leads all these blue liners in points and goals. Yeah, I would have said, you're absolutely kidding. That's how sneaky good Louis Crevier has been. Now totaling all of the points that he had in the 24-25 campaign with the Blackhawks. Also has stepped up and been willing to fought, was that Caden Gooley of the Montreal Canadiens, who he dropped the gloves with after a big hit on Frankie Nazar. And I thought he's handled himself pretty well on the defensive side of things too. In particular, on Tuesday against the Ottawa Senators, I thought he was really sound defensively, in addition to his 2-point contribution. 9 shots on goal for Crevier in 9 games, only averaging 12 minutes and 15 seconds of time on ice, though, which is 7th among all 7 defensemen, but simplifies his game, likes to make the easy play in the offensive zone. I think the 6 other Blackhawks blue liners, maybe not Matt Grzelcyk or Sam Renzel, but the others that I talked about should take a little bit of a page out of his playbook. Crevier's 14 hits also leads all Blackhawks defensemen. He's chipped in for 5 block shots, does have a 38.17 Corsi for percentage and a 37.35 expected goals for percentage. So not regularly in the offensive zone is Louis Crevier. I think that's why those numbers are a little bit low. However, he's been on the ice for 7 goals for to 4 against at even strength. And I know Spencer Knight, for a lot of these guys, that's a key reason why they have low goals against. But for Louis Crevier in a 7th defenseman role, not known for his offense, pretty happy with how he's played in these opening 10 games. Been on the ice for 41 scoring chances for to 55 against. That takes care of the Blackhawks blue line here on Deep Dive 1.0. Coming up in just a moment here, I'll get into segment 2, and we'll go through the stats and analytics for the Blackhawks forward group. But first, I got to talk to you all about Monarch. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. But that's why there is Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, super easy-to-use interface, both available on your phone and on your laptop. And Monarch does all of the heavy lifting for you so that you can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, and finally feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks any longer. Go and use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps at monarch.com, and you'll also get half off on your first year. Again, that's 50% off on your first year at monarch.com when you use our code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Real quick, before I get into segment 2, per usual, please go and smash that like button and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Thank you all very much for the consistent support. Segment 2, getting into the forwards now for the Blackhawks, and I realize this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode than usual. Apologies for that, Blackhawks fans, but we got some good stuff to get into here today. And kicking things off for the forward group is none other than Connor Bedard, coming off of the hat trick on Tuesday, his first of his NHL career, first of many in his NHL career. Vibes are still high following that 7-3 win over the Sens. But for Bedard, still only 20 years old, by the way, in his in his opening 10 games, 6 goals, tied for the team lead after potting 3 on Tuesday night, along with 6 assists. That gives him 12 points, which leads all Blackhawks skaters. 10 penalty minutes for Bedard in the opening 10 games. I think there have been a couple of frustration penalties in there, but as a guy who plays as much as he does, it doesn't really bother me too much. 2 of his 6 goals have come on the man advantage. Had a nice one after being moved over to the right dot on Tuesday, and I'm very interested to see how that move, along with adding Burakovsky to the top line, if that can continue to kind of get the better out of this top power play unit after they've been off to a little bit of a shaky start this year. In those 10 games played, Connor Bedard has 30 shots on goal, leads the team by a pretty good margin in that category. Feel like he's shooting everything at will, and for good reason. I mean, you saw the release on Tuesday, right? Kid has one of the best shots in the entire league. He should be shooting whenever he finds himself in a dangerous area in the offensive zone. And I still think there's even times where he can shoot a little bit more outside of the game against Anaheim, where he had 9 shots on goal and 12 shots attempts. I still think there's more opportunities for him to fire the puck than we've even seen so far this year. 21 minutes and 19 seconds of time on ice for Bedard. He is getting a massive role along with Blashill in their first year together. Not only is that first among all Blackhawks forwards, it's second on the team. Only Alex Vlasic is averaging more time on ice per game than Bedard is, and it's only by like 25 seconds. 43.0 face-off win percentage for Bedard as well in these opening 10 games. Has won over 60% of his draws in each of the last 2 contests. Still, like I talked about yesterday, not getting like a huge share of the face-off opportunities, but to see improvement. That's really what we need to see out of Bedard at the dot this year. Really need to see it after being down at 36-37% in his first 2 NHL campaigns. Somewhere right up around 45%. If Bedard can finish the year with that, I'll be very happy with how he's trending in the face-off circle. 41.75 Corsi for percentage, not exactly great, but I also think that goes into not really having consistent or true quality top line players along with him. And then also with the amount of ice time that he plays per game, and the Blackhawks, being a young group, defending a decent amount still, even though they're having success and winning, have won 5 of their last 7 games, doesn't really surprise me all that much when you consider what kind of goes on into it. But Bedard has been on the ice for 10 goals for to 7 goals against at even strength. You want to see him on the right side of that ledger with his offensive prowess, even if he doesn't have the greatest help alongside him right now. 38.91 expected goals for percentage. This is why I don't consider analytics the end-all be-all, because if you've watched Connor Bedard this year, he looks like a special player. He looks like he's taken leaps in about every area of his game. To have that expected goals for percentage, which again, I know there's a lot of things that tie into it, but it's why analytics should not be the most prevalent thing when people are, having hockey arguments or breaking down analytics. And Bedard has been on the ice for 65 scoring chances for to 90 scoring chances against. And what I will say is, I've talked about how Connor Bedard has made strides defensively, and I think he's a feistier player, and Blashill has talked about how he's noticed, Bedard making improvements on the defensive side of things. He's still not a, flawless defensive player. There's still mistakes. There's still going to be learning curves for a kid of his age. But I do think in terms of him being a long-term center, he's heading in the right direction with how he's handled himself at the face-off dot and some of the upticks that he's made on the defensive side of things. Next up, we got my guy, Frank the Tank Nazar, 21 years old, second leading scorer for the Blackhawks through the opening 10 games with 5 goals and 6 assists. 6 penalty minutes for Frankie Nazar in these opening 10 contests. 1 power play goal, which came on a one-timer off a beautiful feed from Tyler Bertuzzi. Would love to see Nazar get more involved on the man advantage here, which I think he has an opportunity to do so now that Connor Bedard is over on the right dot. 18 shots on goal for Frankie in these 10 contests. I still think he can be shooting the puck a little bit more frequently, especially when both he and Bedard have shooting percentages over 20% right now. They got the confidence. They got it flowing. They just, not as much Bedard, but Nazar just needs to fire the biscuit a little bit more. 19 minutes and 26 seconds of time on ice is what he's averaging. That's second among all Blackhawks forwards. 44.5% is Nazar at the dot in his first full NHL campaign. You'd obviously like to see it above 50, but for a kid who's undersized, hasn't gone up against grown men at the dot too regularly in his young career yet, 44.5%. When I expected the Blackhawks to struggle in terms of faceoffs this year, that's really not all that shabby, in my opinion. 42.98 Corsi for percentage for Frankie Nazar. However, he has been on the ice for 7 goals for to only 2 against at even strength, only 2 against. I think part of that is, A, because Frank Nazar does provide a responsible defensive game, and he wants to make an impact on that side of the puck. He wants to be a hockey player, not an offensive guy, not a playmaker, not a goal scorer. He wants to be a good two-way center iceman. And while I do think that's part of only being on the ice for 2 goals against at even strength, his on-ice save percentage is like 97%. So undoubtedly, he's going to be on the ice for some goals against. That type of save percentage out of Spencer Knight is not going to happen all season long. But I do think part of it also is because of Frank Nazar's desire to make an impact on the defensive side of things. 41.74 expected goals for percentage, just along with Connor Bedard. Doesn't really mean all that much to me. He has been on the ice, though, for 42 scoring chances for to 73 scoring chances against. So I think that also goes to show that probably he's going to be on the ice for some goals against moving forward. But altogether, I've been really impressed with what I've seen from Bedard and Frank Nazar in terms of the eye test. Next up, we got Ryan Donato, who analytically has been the best forward of the Blackhawks this year. 10 games played, tied with Bedard for the team lead in goals with 6. Also was chipped in for 2 assists, giving him 8 points. Good for third on the team. 25 shots on goal out of Ryan Donato is second among all Blackhawks players. And I think, Frankie Nazar, some of these other guys, again, they can take a page out of Ryan Donato's book, who I swear every time I watch him skate into the offensive zone, he has one goal, and that is to put the puck on net. He rifles it on net every time he can, and that sits well with me. Averaging 15 minutes and 48 seconds of time on ice, second pairing role mostly for Donato this year. Do wonder, because he's playing so well, if they eventually are going to give him an opportunity with Connor Bedard and Tyler Bertuzzi again, Connor Bedard and Andre Burakovsky again, on the top line. 16 hits also Donato is chipped in for, which is good for third among all Blackhawks players. And he hasn't been utilized as strictly a center iceman, but he's been capable when they've thrown him in there. He's won 54.6% of his dots. And then, as I mentioned, really good analytically has Ryan Donato been. 51.32 Corsi for percentage, been on the ice for 8 goals for to only 5 against. And he is someone who also plays a responsible two-way game, and then has a 58.59 expected goals for percentage. That is best of the Blackhawks. He's been on the ice for 63 scoring chances for to 54 scoring chances against. On the right side of that ledger, I believe it's only he and Artie Levshinov who are on the right side of that number. Next, we got Teuvo Teravainen, who's played in all 10 games for the Blackhawks as well. Only has 1 goal, which came in the opener against Florida, and only 11 shots on goal in 10 games for Teuvo. As someone who's averaging 18 minutes and 38 seconds of time on ice and was on the top power play unit until last game. I know he's always been a pass-first type of player, but in the top 6, especially with Frankie Nazar, and if you're playing with a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi who loves to crash the net, you got to put the puck on net for him to go and clean up those greasy goals. Do like Teuvo's playmaking, though. He leads all Blackhawks skaters with 7 assists through these opening 10 games, giving him 8 points, tied with Ryan Donato for the third most on the team. But yeah, only 11 shots on goal. That's definitely definitely an area where Teuvo needs to improve. 47.35 Corsi for percentage, which is pretty solid considering the numbers for most of these forwards and most of these Blackhawks players. Like Frankie Nazar, has been on the ice for 7 goals for to only 2 against, and getting some big-time help from Spencer Knight out there. And then 42.14 expected goals for percentage, 45 scoring chances for. He's been on the ice for 45 chances for to 62 scoring chances against. Tyler Bertuzzi, next up, 9 games played. He did miss Sunday's contest against the Los Angeles Kings. Has 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points, and I think has been great in a lot of different ways for the Blackhawks as a little bit of a pest, stepping up and standing up for his teammates from time to time, never taking any crap out there on the ice. I love it from Tyler Bertuzzi. 1 power play goal. Got to find ways to get him more involved right out in front on the man advantage. 20 shots on goal, though, for Bertuzzi, as someone who gets most of his opportunities from right out in front. He's had his chances. 16 minutes and 38 seconds of time on ice is what he's averaging per game. Second line role, just like Teuvo Teravainen. Not getting as many opportunities as Teuvo and Nazar because they play on the penalty kill, but Bert regularly been inside the top 6. 51.53 Corsi for percentage, up there with Ryan Donato for the Blackhawks team leaders in this forward group. Been on the ice for 6 goals for to 6 goals against. 49.07 expected goals for percentage. Well, he's been on the ice for 56 scoring chances for to 55 scoring chances against. So along with Ryan Donato and Artie Levshinov, he is on the right side of that ledger. Next up is Andrei Burakovsky. In 9 games played for him, he's got, just like Burt, 2 goals and 4 assists for 6 points. 1 power play goal, 3 power play points, though, out of Andrei Burakovsky. Thought he's been really good on the man advantage. However, he definitely needs to bring more to the table at 5-on-5 to kind of give Connor Bedard some help. And one way he can do that is shooting the puck more frequently. Only 9 shots on goal for Andrei Burakovsky in 9 games, despite regularly playing with Bedard on one of the 2-man advantage units. As a guy who is mostly known for his speed, size, and goal scoring on the offensive side of things, he's got to be firing the biscuit on net a little bit more frequently. 16 minutes and 37 seconds of time on ice is what Andrei Burakovsky has averaged, with a 42.19 Corsi for percentage. Been out there for 7 goals for to 6 goals against at even strength. 40.68 expected goals for percentage. This is kind of one I agree with, because I don't, think he's been all that effective at even strength. And I think that's why Connor Bedard's even strength numbers don't look all that good. And he's got a low expected goals for percentage, low Corsi percentage, because he hasn't gotten a lot of help from whoever's been up there on the top line with him, whether it's been, Colton Dach, Ryan Green last game, Andrei Burakovsky. Still would love to see Bedard get some more help at even strength. And then Burakovsky's been out there for 53 scoring chances for to 78 against. So, like kind of in the similar sense to Frankie Nazar and Teuvo Teravainen, the amount of scoring chances that they've been out there against. You probably expect some regression on the defensive side of things from those guys based on what the analytics tell you, but it's also not the biggest sample size in the world either, with only 10 games. And then last but certainly not least, Ilya Mikheyev, who forgot Tyler Bertuzzi. I've been starting to call him the junkyard dog recently, but Ilya Mikheyev, he's the greyhound. He is a dog himself. Big whoop. I love what Ilya Mikheyev brings to the table on a nightly basis. Hopefully he'll be healthy enough to go for the Hawks tonight, as I'll get into here in just a moment. But in his 9 games played, 3 goals, 2 of them coming in win against the Utah Mammoth. Also has chipped in for 2 assists for 5 points. He's +5 on the year, which I think is pretty darn impressive for a guy who regularly plays in defensive situations, is known for his penalty kill prowess. But +5 at even strength. Good stuff out of Ilya Mikheyev. 19 shots on goal for him also. Again, Andrei Burakovsky, Frankie Nazar, start shooting that biscuit. Good things happen. 17 minutes and 47 seconds of time on ice for Ilya Mikheyev. 38.66 Corsi for percentage, as well as a 44.29 expected goals for percentage. That's because he mostly plays in defensive situations along with, Jason Dickinson, and isn't necessarily known for his offensive contributions, but can do that. And like we saw last year, potted 20 goals for the Blackhawks and handled his own when he did get an opportunity on the top line with Connor Bedard. He's been on the ice for 5 goals for to 1 goal against at even strength. And I went and looked at his on-ice save percentage. I think it's like 98.6. And while definitely part of that is Ilya Mikheyev is a good defender, and when he's out there, you usually don't give up too many high danger opportunities, but undoubtedly that number is going to go down throughout the course of the season. I just thought that was pretty funny. But 40 scoring chances for to 61 against has Ilya Mikheyev been on the ice for. Again, not all that surprising considering the defensive role that he plays. Then we got Colton Dach, who's played in all 10 games for the Blackhawks here in what looks like it's going to be his first full NHL season. Finally scored his first goal on Tuesday to kick off the scoring against the Sens. Has also chipped in with 2 assists for 3 points. 13 shots on goal for Colton Dach in those 10 games. I know he's mostly a net front guy. Would have liked to see him fire the puck a little bit more when he was playing along with Bedard on the top line. Averaging 13 minutes and 51 seconds of time on ice is Dach, but the area where he's undoubtedly made the biggest impact is in the physicality department. 44 hits, leads the team by a wide margin. Nick Foligno is second. You could double his hits, and Colton Dach would still be in the lead. He's in the top 10 in the NHL in hits and leads all rookies as well. 46.45 Corsi for percentage out of Colton Dach. Kind of confused me a little bit, but it is what it is. 3 goals for to 5 goals against at even strength. Not a huge offensive contributor, which is why I was a little surprised that the Corsi for is as good as it is. He's been on the ice for, the other team is still getting more shot attempts than the Blackhawks are when Colton Dach's on the ice. But that one surprised me a little bit. 40.85 expected goals for percentage, though, even though he's only been on the ice for 43 scoring chances for he's been on the ice for 43 scoring chances for to only 53 against. And then last but certainly not least, we got Ryan Green, who made the NHL roster out of training camp and has played in all 10 games for the Blackhawks so far this year, tallying 1 goal, his first NHL tuck against the Blues in the beatdown over the Blues, has also chipped in for 1 assist, giving him 2 points. Want to point out that Ryan Green is a +1, which as a guy who really doesn't offer much on the offensive side of things right here, right now, and is mostly known for his defensive abilities, starts in the defensive zone. To be a +1 as a rookie, I think is good stuff. Averaging 11 minutes and 56 seconds of time on ice, and has won 49.3% of his faceoffs as a rookie. That's something I talked about in training camp and in the preseason, and why I thought Ryan Green was going to make this team. Because he can win faceoffs, and we knew that was kind of going to be a problem for Connor Bedard and Frankie Nazar, 2 undersized guys who are young in their own careers. Well, Ryan Green, right out of college, looks like he's capable of winning at the dot. And like Bedard, he hasn't, been getting a ton of opportunities there. They've been playing Nick Foligno, giving him faceoffs. They've given Tyler Bertuzzi even faceoffs at times to kind of see if they can help these youngsters win a little bit more. But for Green to be 49.3% through his first 10 games, I think is really good stuff. 41.27 Corsi for percentage for him, 38.51 expected goals for percentage. Again, not really contributing much in terms of the offensive cycle and on the offensive side of things, but has been on the ice for only 3 goals against and 5 goals for at even strength through these opening 10 games. Well, he's been on the ice for 33 scoring chances for to 53 scoring chances against. Last takeaway I want to get into, Blackhawks fans. I know it's a really long episode. I appreciate you all hanging in there with me. What these analytics definitely tell me, though, is how good Spencer Knight has been to start off the season, and that we have to be okay with some potential bumps in the road in terms of goals against, and the Blackhawks not being as solid in terms of limiting the opponent to how many goals they score on a nightly basis. That's based on the analytics, probably going to be happening a little bit more frequently, but that's to be expected with this young Blackhawks group. And with Spencer Knight only being 24 and in his first year as a number 1 starter, he's off to an incredible start. But in terms of whether he can keep that up with a young defense in front of him, who I do think has handled himself pretty well, like I talked about, there's just probably going to be some regression I think we can expect from this young Blackhawks team. Not to be discouraging or anything, but that's kind of what the analytics say. But undoubtedly, why the Blackhawks are winning these games too is because they have more game breakers on the NHL roster than they do than ever. With Connor Bedard taking major leaps in year 3, with Frankie Nazar being a point per game guy through his opening 10 games this season, there just is more capability for this Blackhawks team to provide goals when they do get in those dangerous areas. And that's one thing that opportunities or analytics don't necessarily weigh, is how dangerous the opportunities you're getting are. And I think that's one thing the Blackhawks definitely have an uptick of this year with this new young group. That is one thing I did want to point out. In addition to obviously not getting into Nick Foligno or Jason Dickinson and their stats here, both of those guys have only played in 7 games. Sam Lafferty, Landon Slaggert have only played in 3 games as well. So no analytics or stats for them here today, but they will be part of Blackhawks Deep Dive 2.0 after they wrap up their 20th game of the 25-26 season. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, I appreciate y'all sticking with me up until the very end. I will get into a preview of tonight's matchup against Jonathan Toews and the Winnipeg Jets. But first, I got to talk to you all about another one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer, because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And what I personally love about FanDuel is that it's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. With player props, same-game parlays, and more ways than ever to get in on the action, are you ready to play? All you got to do is download the FanDuel app now or go and visit FanDuel.com today in order to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet and get $300 worth of bonus bets when it wins. Segment 3, coming off an awesome 7-3 win over the Ottawa Senators in their last time out, led, of course, by Connor Bedard's hat trick as part of his 4-point game. The Hawks are now set to kick off their 6-game road trip up north of the border in Winnipeg when they face off with the Jets. And, of course, That means they're going to be playing Jonathan Toews for the first time. Taser facing his old team. Definitely going to be a little bit weird seeing Toews on the opposing bench, rocking the Winnipeg Jets sweater. I know it still is a little bit weird for some of us Blackhawks fans, but undoubtedly it's so good to see Jonathan Toews back in the game after spending 2 years, traveling, getting his body right, doing a bunch of different things to try to get his mind right as well. It's so cool that he's gotten to a point where he feels confident enough in his own health and in his body to go and return to the National Hockey League. And he's off to a pretty good start here with Winnipeg, as they are as well. They've won 7 of their opening 10 contests with a 7-3-0 record. Taser has 5 points in the opening 10 games, 2 goals and 3 assists, while he's also, just like riding a bike, the second leading faceoff man in the entire league at 64%. Tim Stützle, who I mentioned going into Tuesday's matchup, was second in the NHL in that category because of the success he found against the Blackhawks at the dot. He now leads the league in terms of faceoff win percentage. But Toews at the morning skate, as he's been for at least the last handful of games with the Jets, centered their second line along with Vladislav Namestnikov and Alex Iafallo. Mark Scheifele, who's got 15 points through 10 games, is the leading point scorer for Winnipeg. Their captain as well, obviously, along with Kyle Connor, who's second on the team in points, and Gabe Vilardi, who's third. They make up Winnipeg's top line. And I do want to point out, no Adam Lowry, the captain for them. No, it's not Mark Scheifele, the captain. I don't know why I just called Mark Scheifele the captain a minute ago. I apologize for that. It is Adam Lowry. He's out of the lineup for the Winnipeg Jets tonight as he's still recovering from off-season surgery. And no Cole Perfetti, Mr. Game 7, who tied it up late in the third period against the St. Louis Blues. Both of them have missed each of the opening 10 games for Winnipeg. At the morning skate, Connor Hellebuck was in between the pipes. Wish it was Eric Comrie, but, he's off to a pretty good start this year as well, as Winnipeg, both of their goaltenders have a .926 save percentage on the year. But looks like it's going to be Connor Hellebuck, who has a pretty good resume against the Blackhawks in his career. 27-1 with a 2.26 goals against average, .923 save percentage, in 2 shutouts in 28 games for the Blackhawks. He'll be in between the pipes as Jonathan Toews, the former 3-time Stanley Cup champion, captain, as I said off the jump, franchise icon, one of the best and most impactful members of the Blackhawks. Undoubtedly, in their 100-year history, he's going to be facing off against his former team this evening. The Jets, by the way, I mentioned 7-3-0 in their first 10 games, but they continue to play phenomenal defensive hockey, which has always been their bread and butter. Third in the NHL in goals against. They're also top 10 on the penalty kill as well. Play a really strong defensive game, which is going to test this Blackhawks offense after a 7-goal output in their last outing. Going to be going up against a much more formidable defensive foe here tonight, and also have not fared all that well against the Winnipeg Jets, as Winnipeg is 12-1-1 against Chicago since the start of the 21-22 season. And going back to April of 2018, they've won 20 of the last 25 meetings between these two squads. And not only has it been tough sledding for the Blackhawks against the Jets, but it's been really tough for them on the road, in particular in the 6 cities that they're about to play in during this upcoming 6-game road trip, which was pointed out by Ben Pope of the Chicago Sun-Times. Hawks are 1-15-1 in their last 17 games in these 6 cities. So after getting off to a really promising start to the season, this is a big road trip and a big test coming up for this young Blackhawks squad. How they handle these 6 games on the road when they haven't had a lot of success in these buildings in recent years is going to be, I think, a good indicator of what we can expect from them moving forward, even though obviously a long road trip is going to be very difficult for this group. I think we're going to learn a lot about them, how they fare over these next 6 games. In terms of the Blackhawks side of things, Spencer Knight set to get the start once again. It'll be his 8th start in the opening 11 contest for Chicago. He's now, 4-2-1 on the season, has won 4 of his last 5 outings, and now has a 2.11 goals against average and .930 save percentage on the year. Again, been one of the best goaltenders in the entire NHL. Stopped 21 of 24 shots on Tuesday to earn the victory over Ottawa. And in terms of his career against the Jets, only has 2 meetings against them. One of them came late last season after being acquired by the Blackhawks. Stopped 38 of 42 shots faced in the penultimate game of the 24-25 campaign that sadly resulted in a 5-4 shootout win for the Jets. In terms of the Blackhawks lineup, didn't really learn a lot from Jeff Blashill at the morning skate, as all 13 forwards on the roster, in addition to all 7 defensemen, took part in line rushes. What was interesting to me is that Ryan Green was back up on the top line along with Connor Bedard and Andre Burakovsky, and this came while Ilya Mikheyev was participating in the morning skate. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Blackhawks fans. They tried it because they were down Mikheyev. Bertuzzi joined up on the second line, and I talked about how, maybe because they didn't put Colton Dach up there with Bedard and Burakovsky, that was done because Dickinson and Slaggert had a really good game on Sunday against Los Angeles. Well, Slaggert ended up being healthy scratched on Tuesday. Colton Dach stayed down in the bottom 6. I don't really understand Ryan Green being up there with Bedard and Burakovsky unless it's to go and try and win some faceoffs and get Bedard the puck a little bit more frequently. This one doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I would much rather have either Mikheyev or Tyler Bertuzzi up on that top line. Teuvo Teravainen, Frankie Nazar, and Tyler Bertuzzi, they look like they're going to remain the second line here this evening. Ilya Mikheyev, excuse me, Blackhawks fans. It's what happens when you talk on the podcast for an hour. Ilya Mikheyev, if he does make his return to the lineup tonight, Jeff Blashill officially said after the morning skate that he'll be a game time decision. If he does play, looks like it's going to come on the third line with Ryan Donato and Jason Dickinson, while the fourth line during the morning skate was Colton Dach, Nick Foligno, and Sam Lafferty. Landon Slaggert was skating in line rushes as the 13th forward, likely hinting that he's going to be a healthy scratch for a second consecutive game. If Ilya Mikheyev plays, I'm guessing Sam Lafferty is going to draw out of the lineup. Didn't really make much of an impact in Tuesday's blowout win. So I would guess if Mickey plays, he's going to be in there. If Mickey doesn't play, then we'll probably see Sam Lafferty for a second consecutive game. Defensively, no changes expected to come. As Blashill has mentioned, he loves rolling with 7 defensemen, as been evident by how he's utilized that lineup strategy in, I believe, 8 consecutive games now, continuing here tonight. Vlasic and Renzel is the top pairing. Kaiser and Levshinov as the second. Hope Wyatt Kaiser can play like Artie has a little bit more of a sturdy game here this evening after a couple of shaky ones in a row. Then Matt Grzelcyk and Connor Murphy, the 2 vets who haven't contributed a ton offensively, but also haven't put themselves in harm's way on the defensive side of things, round things out. Well, Louis Crevier, the leading point scorer, leading goal scorer of the Blackhawks blue line, is set to serve as the 7th defenseman. That is going to wrap up a very long episode of Locked On Blackhawks. If you stuck with me from start to finish, just know I really, really appreciate you, Blackhawks fans. And I would also appreciate, if you haven't done so already, to please go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way, you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes as soon as they come out. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman 2, but make sure to check out my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey to get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode, everyone, go Hawks. Weird statement, but let's go and pick up a win over Jonathan Toews. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.